Right in the middle of the most important investor meeting of her career, my girlfriend's startup partner pointed straight at my face and declared, she needs someone on her level, not him. The entire room fell silent. And when I still didn't say a word, she turned to me and yelled, "Useless idiot, say something or we're finished." I looked at her, smiled, and walked away. Most people in that room assumed they had just witnessed a man get humiliated into silence. They saw a boyfriend dragged along to a business meeting he didn't belong in. A quiet guy too timid to defend himself. And Lena, the woman I loved, made sure that impression stuck with every word she spat at me. What none of them knew was who I actually was. My name is Adrian Nguyen, 32 years old, a senior financial strategist who has quietly handled deals big enough to make or break entire companies. I'm the kind of man whose work happens behind closed doors, whose influence is felt but rarely seen. I don't brag. I don't posture. I don't compete for attention. I make decisions that move millions without ever raising my voice. Silence has never been my weakness. It's always been my weapon. Lena, 28, was the opposite of me in almost every way. A bright, fast-talking, ambitious young founder, energized by crowds and attention, by pitch stages and lights. When I met her 2 years ago, she was pure fire, passionate, messy, driven, full of dreams sketched on notebook pages and crude app prototypes. I loved her for that raw sincerity, the way her eyes glowed each time she talked about changing the user experience forever. Her startup was barely alive back then. But I believed in her, enough to step into the role she needed most, the silent backbone. The first company loan? It was approved because I signed the personal guarantee. Lena knew that. Mark didn't. The financial plan she presented to investors? Every projection, every chart, every risk scenario, I wrote them. I was the one staring at spreadsheets at 2 a.m. while she slept. 3 of the investors in that room? They came because I asked them to hear her out, men I'd made money with before, men who trusted my judgment. And the entire time, I never once asked for my name on anything. I wanted her success to be hers. I wanted her to step into the spotlight with both feet, not standing on my shoulders. Then came Mark, 30, her newly added co-founder. A polished talker with a pitch deck for a personality. The kind of man who knows exactly how to say the right buzzwords while having no idea what they actually mean. To inexperienced investors, he looked confident. To Lena, he looked like the embodiment of ambition. To me, he looked like trouble, the loud kind, the hollow kind, the kind that depends entirely on theatrics because substance would expose him. And Mark hated me from the moment he realized I wasn't intimidated by him. Lena changed slowly, then suddenly. The more attention her startup received, the more she convinced herself that noise mattered more than strategy. She began to mistake my calm for passivity, my caution for doubt, my silence for weakness. Whenever I pointed out gaps in accounting, she sighed, "Adrian, you worry too much. Startups need bold moves." Whenever I flagged the inconsistencies in Mark's projections, she brushed it off, "You're being too conservative." Mark understands investor psychology. Piece by piece, the Lena I loved slipped away and became someone who listened more to approval than to truth, someone who started believing that volume equaled talent. And by the time that pitch meeting came, the cracks in her judgment were no longer cracks. They were fractures. The meeting itself was doomed before it even began. Investors asked tough, grounded questions, the kind that required real numbers, real understanding. Lena stumbled. Mark tried to drown their doubts with words like disruptive, AI-powered, market domination. None of it landed. Investors can smell desperation the way sharks smell blood. Then one of them, a seasoned investor I personally introduced to Lena, turned to me. "Adrian, what's your view on the financial model?" He knew who I was. He wanted to hear from the only person who actually understood the numbers. But before I could speak, Mark nearly leapt out of his seat, pointing at me like a child guarding a toy. She needs someone on her level, he said loudly, not him. A line rehearsed. A punch meant to embarrass. A territorial display from a man terrified I might speak the truth. And Lena, the woman I had held, supported, believed in, looked at me with genuine contempt and spit out, "Useless idiot, say something or we're finished." That wasn't stress talking. That wasn't heat of the moment frustration. That was who she had become. I held her gaze. Saw every poor choice reflected in her eyes. Understood everything in that single second. Then I smiled, a small, final, permanent smile, and walked out. Not because I was defeated. Not because I was hurt. But because my silence was the sound of a door closing. And when a man like me closes a door, it never opens again. When the conference room door shut behind me, the world finally went quiet. Not the fragile kind of quiet that comes from shock, but the decisive quiet that follows when a man has made up his mind. I didn't storm out. I didn't break down. I simply walked away from the moment I realized there was nothing left worth staying for. My phone vibrated before I even reached the elevator. Lena, where are you? Then, please, we need to talk. Then, Adrian, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I didn't reply. She had spoken loudly when it benefited her. I chose to speak through silence. That evening, she came to my apartment. I heard her knock, soft at first, then sharp, then shaky. Adrian, please open the door. Her voice trembled, the same voice that only hours earlier called me useless in front of a room full of investors. I stood behind the door, unmoving. Some things you don't fix. Some things you walk away from. She stayed 10 minutes. Then left. Not a single part of me felt compelled to follow. The next morning, Mark called. The arrogance in his voice from the meeting was gone. Adrian, hey, look, yesterday was messy. You know how pitches get. No, I said flatly. I know how real pitches get. That wasn't one. He tried again. I didn't mean what I said. I just needed to control the room. You don't control rooms, Mark, I replied. You perform in them. The silence on his end told me he finally understood something. I wasn't the quiet one. I was the one he should have feared. I hung up before he could spin more excuses. As the days passed, the walls of Lumina began to crack, exactly as I knew they would without someone steady behind the scenes. Investors asked for revised financials. Lena and Mark scrambled. PowerPoints shifted colors, numbers were inflated, projections reshuffled. But none of it mattered, the foundation had rotted long before. Then the bank reached out. They had reviewed the loan. Reassessed the risk. And noticed the absence of a familiar signature. Lena texted me in panic, "Did you remove your guarantee? The bank is asking questions." Mark is furious. Adrian, please. This affects everything. I read her messages. Then put my phone down. Consequences don't require explanations. Week 2 hit even harder. Lumina's revised valuation came back nearly 60% lower than before. Without proper financial oversight, their burn rate looked reckless. Their projections looked naive. And every answer Lena tried to give investors only dug her deeper. A senior engineer resigned. A designer walked out mid-week. A potential partner pulled the plug, writing simply, "Viper Tech's product is more stable." That one line said everything. Lena called again, the kind of call someone makes when pride is finally cracking. Adrian. I know I hurt you. But please, just tell me what's happening. You've never been like this. Exactly, I said. I've never had a reason to be. She fell silent, and for a moment, I heard something I had never heard from her before, respect mixed with fear. But it wasn't enough. The turning point, the moment where conflict became collapse, arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Lumina requested a third-party valuation, desperate to rebuild investor trust. They expected a difficult report. What they didn't expect was the predator staring back at them. On page 4, under Acquisition Interest, a name appeared, Viper Tech. A formal inquiry. A brutal offer. A clear signal that Lumina was no longer a rising star, it was prey. And printed directly under the section titled Lead Strategic Investor, Adrian Nguyen. Lena must have stared at that name until her vision blurred. Because the moment she saw it, she called immediately. This time, I answered. Her voice cracked, Adrian, tell me this isn't you. It is, I said. Why? Why would you do this? Because I invest in competence, I replied. And Lumina ran out of that the day you stopped listening. She inhaled sharply. You're trying to destroy me. No, I said. I don't need to destroy anything. I just stopped holding it upright. Gravity did the rest. On the other end, I heard her breath shaking. The realization hit her like a slow, cold wave, I wasn't her enemy. I was her infrastructure. And the moment she tried to humiliate me out of the room, she lost the last person capable of saving the company. Adrian, she whispered. Please. Just tell me what I can do. You can't do anything, I said. Not anymore. She didn't speak again. She finally understood the conflict wasn't between her and me. It was between who she was, and who she became. And she lost that battle the moment she chose noise over substance. 3 weeks after I walked out of that meeting room, Lena finally learned what a world without me looked like. Investors stopped replying. Internal deadlines collapsed. Mark tried to keep up the confident act, but the cracks in his voice were impossible to hide. Lumina wasn't sinking, it was rotting from within. Meanwhile, I didn't waste a single day. I invested in Viper Tech, a tiny competitor with real engineers, real product, and zero ego. They didn't need flashy words. They needed structure. And structure was something I could build in my sleep. Within weeks, I rebuilt their financial model, rewrote their pitch, connected them to the right rooms, and secured the funding Lumina had been begging for. While Lena and Mark tried to plug holes in a ship made of cardboard, I helped Viper Tech upgrade into steel. The first tremor hit when Lena realized the bank had re-evaluated their loan. She didn't need me to admit it, she knew I had withdrawn my guarantee. The second tremor came when investors forced a new valuation. Lumina had lost more than half its value without me quietly fixing things. And the third, the one that truly broke them, arrived when Viper Tech launched a more stable, cleaner, faster product. Overnight, Lumina went from promising to irrelevant. But the real twist came with a single email. Viper Tech submitted an acquisition inquiry for Lumina, a brutal lowball that told the world exactly how weak the company had become. And on the list of Viper Tech's lead strategic investors, right at the top, bolded, unmistakable, Adrian Nguyen, the man Lena called useless. The man she mocked in front of investors. The man she thought she'd outgrown. My phone buzzed relentlessly. I answered on the 11th call. Her voice was thin, breaking apart. Adrian, is this you? Yes. Why would you do this? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I simply told the truth, I invested in a company that deserved it. The silence on her end was louder than anything she'd ever yelled at me. Because for the first time, Lena understood the twist, I wasn't the obstacle in her success. I was the foundation, and she had kicked it out from under herself. The night the acquisition rumor spread, Lena finally stopped trying to sound strong. When she called, her voice was shaking, not with anger, but with fear. Adrian, everything is collapsing. Investors pulled out. Mark left. He blamed everything on me. I let her speak. Let her spill every consequence. She was finally living inside the reality she had built. Adrian, please, she whispered. I need your help. Lumina is my whole life. It's all I have. No, I said. It's not your whole life. It's your lesson. She cried, quietly, helplessly. I'm sorry. I really am. Please just tell me what to do. I'll fix it. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. You want the truth? I asked. Yes. This is what happens when you choose the loudest man in the room over the right one. Her breath broke. Adrian. I didn't mean what I said in the meeting. I was stressed. You meant it, I said, voice steady. That's why it mattered. Then the final question, the one she had been circling around like a wounded animal, can you save me? I answered exactly as I needed to. I could. A pause. But I won't. She sobbed harder. Why? Because I respect myself more than that. I ended the call. Then blocked her. Not to hurt her, but to close the door she had slammed first. 2 months later, Viper Tech completed the acquisition. Mark vanished. Lena walked away with almost nothing, her shares diluted to dust long before the deal. She left the city quietly, without announcements, without the confidence she used to cling to like armor. And me? I moved forward. Calm, steady, silent. Viper Tech grew. Investors trusted me more. And people in my world finally understood something essential, my silence wasn't emptiness. It was calculation. And when a man like me walks away, he takes the future with him. Lena didn't lose because I won. She lost because she never learned the difference between quiet strength and loud weakness. In the end, she discovered the truth the hardest way possible: silence isn't weakness. Silence is warning. And when a man walks away in silence, he's already gone forever.